led adaptation, because this is a key priority for Ireland and one in which we are lobbying others in cooperation with Samantha Power in USAID. We need to do much more and more urgently in respect of adaptation. Let me assure you of the priority that I attach to your work and to Ireland's climate obligations, including our international obligations. Again, particularly in the area of climate finance, to which we are attached and we want to do more. I want to wish you fruitful, there's plenty of fruit on the table, fruitful deliberations, and to reiterate Ireland's ongoing support for your work to strengthen the Africa-Europe partnership, which is so crucial for all of us. Thank you very much indeed.
Which is this one.
To scale up all the issues that we would like to address. We spent the weekend listening to stakeholders, and this was important because the UN was full from Saturday and Sunday, everyone telling us what their major issues are. And I think what we're getting out of this is that while it's a sober, there's a sober take on where we are halfway, everyone is enthused to walk out of this place more determined to get things done. And I think that's the hope that we have to give the rest of the world, is that it can be done, and we've got concrete things to do. We were talking about the climate health nexus. I think that, it's very important that we still have not got the whole of the sustainable development investment framing. We are still in our silos, we are still with our mandates, and the funding is difficult to get out of that. So anything that our donors can do to help do more pool funding to get those joined up responses, the better we will be at this. But if we stay where we are, we're seeing in the field in every country that this is a huge challenge to civil society, to government, to the UN itself in trying to deal with the triple planetary crisis. It's together. They reinforce the can-do, and they look at the challenges with the solutions to get over them. That's the spirit that we need right now, because it's too easy, and I do it all the time. The reality's not good, but there's a lot that we need to say is that glass that is some full. Let's actually talk about what's in it and how we can get to fill it by 2030. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amina, both I think for your hope and for your persistent determination in all the difficulties that you see. The elders are also very worried about the lack of commitment on health. We will be speaking about that, and we have strengths. We now have a new elder, Helen Clark, has joined us. So we have Helen Clark, and we will be doing whatever we can as elders. But now, without delay, let me turn to Kristalina. Again, the context and leading to COP28. You have stood tall yourself. Please take the floor.
Thank you very much. I want to start from the status of our fight against climate change, and it is disturbing. We are so far from where we have to be. When we look at emission reduction by 2030, we have to be with 50% more than we currently have, and time is running short. When we look at the incentive environment to decarbonize faster, we are not where we should be. We are still tolerating subsidies for fossil fuels, but most significantly, when you look below the tip of this iceberg, the subsidies we see are the subsidies we don't see. Above all, not pricing carbon, as well as the health impacts of climate change. We are not capturing those, and they run in the trillions, not in the billions. So at the IMF, we work with our membership primarily to understand the macro criticality of climate change, how climate change affects economies, takes away from the well-being of people, and what can be done to both mitigate faster and to adapt to what is already happening. On the mitigation side, our most important contribution is in fiscal and monetary policies. Fiscal policies, we are a big proponent of pricing carbon through tax, trade, or regulatory measures. Predictable upward trajectory of carbon price is also desired by businesses. They want to know so they can adjust. And as we all know where we are today, average global price on carbon $5, where we should be by 2030, $75 at least. So we have work to do there. On the monetary policy side, we help countries look into the climate-related financial stability risks. Present. In our own work, we have by now accelerated, including gender, in our normal assessments of economic policy. we started by saying, we were very modest, Mary. We said we would go with 11 countries.
Mhm.
We have 22.
Uh-huh.
1/3 of them are in Africa. And of course, we are very keen to see more attention to the comprehensive impact of climate change, including on health. Now, people are dying because of heat waves. People are dying because a flood unleashes waterborne diseases. People are dying because mosquitoes return and then malaria expand. So we have to understand this impact to be able to fight it. I want to finish with one very important aspect of our work, and it is financing the fight against climate change. We have created, as Amina mentioned, the Resilience and Sustainability Trust. It is 40 billion strong. In one short year, we have gotten to 10 programs already. And what is very important, 5 of these programs are in sub-Saharan Africa. Why? Because this is the continent that has done nothing to create the climate crisis, but is more severely impacted. Therefore, resilience to climate shocks, building this resilience in Africa is so hugely important. So if we all do all we can win it.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Kristalina. I really liked actually the fact that you see the importance of women's leadership too. And I hope people will learn more about the Dandelion project. I've given you
Yes.
your Dandelion, which and I'm going to give Ngozi one before she leaves. But before I turn to Ngozi, I think Amina, you want to come back on the Climate Ambition Summit now.
Yes, thank you, Kristalina. You jogged my memory there because it's true we're doing dreadfully on the climate. It's regressing so fast. We look like we will get a COP28 that is fossil fuels and fossil fuels and fossil fuels. The Climate Ambition Summit that happens the day after tomorrow, this is a struggle. And what we're trying to do is to create momentum to get into COP28. But we are dealing with 5 countries who have issued collectively more than 100 licenses to go out and do more fossil fuel. Now, in some of these countries, they've done really ambitious stuff on the renewables and the transitions, and we have to give them credit for that. But it's just going too bad on the other side, and mitigation. And so anything that we can do to really put the pressure from here to pre-COP to COP28 that this is not the future. It is sliding back. Countries are not able to come into that climate ambition space and say that this is what they've done. We're getting a few countries there, even business, the alliance will be there, but it's really not good. And these are countries who do not need to have any more licenses issued in their countries.
Yeah.
I'll just end by saying Africa's done more than many in adhering to all the targets we set for Paris. The Africa Climate Summit showed that. It also showed that Africa was putting solutions on the table. But here's another inequality. They're being held to higher standards than those in developed countries, and they're still trying to make the standards with women's leadership, with the mitigation, the transitions, everything that others should be doing. And I think that this is also where we need to say to the G20, 82 of the 2% of emissions are still with you, and that's going to be. Thank you.
Well, just to say, I actually addressed the march yesterday and marched together with Vanessa, whom I'll be calling on very shortly to speak, because I think the elders have to give every kind of leadership. But Ngozi, I was going to call on you, and I think Georgieva, you have to slip away.
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, I hope you can stay.
I see. This is
Ngozi,
Yeah.
please. Come beside me.
Yeah.
Good.
This is the seat of people, how to sit away.
Yeah, good.
Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you to the Minister for being with us today, and great to see you, Mary Amina. I should commend Ireland also for the co-facilitation of the SDG Summit and the whole process. So thank you for doing all of that and for hosting us this morning. I just want to take off a little bit. Amina made a comment that health is falling off the agenda. And I think it is because we are not surfacing adequately the linkage between health and climate. There's a lot of sophisticated work done in journals by the medical profession, but popularly, we are not surfacing enough of that. There's a study that shows that there are 1,000 pathways through which climate can affect health. But the first point I want to make is if we want to hit on both climate and health, we need to do something to surface and publicize the linkages much more. Of course, as Kristalina was leaving, she talked about the malaria-carrying mosquitoes now in Florida, which have not been seen in a decade. We have dengue-carrying mosquitoes in France. So things that we haven't seen before are surfacing everywhere, and I think that those threats is very obvious. So I think there's a piece of work that we need to do to make better known these linkages if we are going to get the kind of interest we need. I think the second point I want to make is that what the study says, which is very nice, coordinated action. We cannot solve any of these problems unless we act at all levels and act together. That's a very important point. Community-based action, national action, but also global action and multilaterals working together. So we need to coordinate these actions, and of course what we're all saying is we don't see enough of that. So the question we need to ask ourselves, how do we generate this action? How do we get the kind of coordination that is needed if we're going to tackle the problems of health and climate? And the third point I would like to make is has to do with the area in which I work. We help a lot on finance. We need finance for a just transition. We need to honor our pledges. We need trillions, and that is all true. But I think we should learn the lessons from the pandemic. During the pandemic, there was a time there wasn't finance, but we finally got it. But what happened? Developing countries were still left at the back of the queue for vaccines. But many people do not know why they were left at the back of the queue for vaccines. There was money. I was at Gavi when we made a contract for enough AstraZeneca for the African continent, but we never got it. Does anybody know why?
Racism? I was going to say racism.
Racism? No, it's not racism. It's trade policy. The missing element in what we need to do is trade. People don't even think about it. The reason it took some time to make some vaccines is because there were export restrictions on inputs in the supply chain. So at one time, India couldn't get what it needed from the US to manufacture because of the Defense Production Act that stopped inputs. You know that vaccines, for instance, have a very long supply chain. 19 countries, 82 manufacturing sites for
Europe did not impose export restrictions.
Yeah, Europe didn't. Europe was
better. It needs to be said, the European Union did not. It's an important point. I think you're right in what you're saying.
Some parts of Europe did, but I'll come to that. So the US at some point had import restrictions on that. We monitor it, so I know who imposed when. So we did, they didn't get the inputs. I will tell you about Ireland. We didn't get the inputs to India needed to manufacture. There were appeals to the US, and eventually they lifted. Then when the AstraZeneca was manufactured in India, what happened? India put export restrictions. It was at the height of their pandemic. So I think politically, even though they didn't need all of that, to be seen to be allowing vaccines to leave to another place when you had at the height of the epidemic didn't look politically good. So they put export restrictions and we couldn't get the vaccines. So in November, I had to fly to Delhi. I spoke to Prime Minister Modi to help us by releasing these vaccines. So what am I trying to say? We focused on money, that's great. But there are non-financial factors that we need to pay attention to. Otherwise, we might have all the money in the world and we'll still be stuck. And that is where trade comes in. So if we are to solve the problems of health and climate, we also need to pay attention to where trade policies can be harmful and where they can be helpful. So we've learned the lessons from the help developing countries develop the legislative framework that will enable them. But the urgency is no longer there. Eyes have moved away, and we need to resurface that urgency. So those are the points that I'd like to make.
Thank you very much, Ngozi. As always, you bring a very important dimension, which frankly I don't hear enough in the climate space. The importance of factoring in trade rules and the trade position, but also your point on the TRIPS agreement and the lack of, both of you have talked about the lack of urgency on health. The elders are very concerned about this. It's a real problem. We're going to hear from